There's a man wading into a freezing mountain creek in late October, and it will cost him everything. Not because he was a fool, because he was doing exactly what he thought he was supposed to do. 5 mistakes show up in the accounts of the men who died in that country. Same 5, over and over, and every one of them maps onto what I still see modern hikers doing today. We're counting down to the worst one, and I'll tell you now, it isn't the one most folks are afraid of. And because I'd rather you trust me than be impressed by me. So before we get into them, I want to be plain about one thing. None of these 5 require expensive gear you don't have. What they require is knowing what you're up against and making a different decision than the man who came before you made. That's the whole game. Let's go. My name is Cole Hartwell, and after more than 50 years living in the mountains, I've learned a thing or two about how to survive in the wild. Right now, there's a man sitting by a fire with rabbit roasting on a stick, and he's eaten 3 of them tonight. He's not starving. He feels full, and he is going to die of starvation. That sounds impossible. It isn't. The old hands had seen it enough that they knew what to watch for, though most of them described what happened without giving it a name. What we'd call it now is protein poisoning, or rabbit starvation. When you eat nothing but lean meat, especially small game like rabbit or squirrel, your body has to process more protein than your liver can handle without fat to balance it. The man gains no useful energy from the food. He gets weaker by degrees. His gut rebels. He gets confused, and all the while he feels like he's eating because he is. Here's the part most folks never hear. To break down all that protein, the body has to spend resources it's already short on. It pulls water to flush out what the liver can't handle, so you get dehydrated while you're drinking. It burns your own fat and then your own muscle to make up the energy the lean meat won't give. A man on nothing but rabbit is feeding himself and starving himself in the same bite. The Lewis and Clark expedition journals documented this plainly. The men wrote that lean game served rather to weaken than to add strength when they had no fat to eat with it. The mountain men in the Rockies learned the same lesson from the land, not from any book. In a good valley, in a good season, you can pull rabbit from a snare all morning without much effort. That meat is free, it's filling, and it will kill you slowly while you think you're fine. The land looks generous. That's the trap. What you're doing now is a version of the same mistake. Underpacking food on a quick trip, figuring you'll supplement from what you find, building your plan around things going right. Most of us don't have the option of hunting all day for fat game. Your body needs fat calories, not just protein. It needs calories your liver can actually do something with. The fix is to carry more food than you think you need, and make sure it has real fat in it. The old hands carried pemmican when they could get it, which is rendered fat pressed together with dried meat. Dense, reliable, made from the fattest parts of the animal. You don't have to make pemmican, but those light-packaged, calorie-counted camp meals designed for weight savings, the old hands would know exactly what those are. Lean meat in a shiny bag. Honest limit. This one won't kill you in a day. Rabbit starvation takes time. A man eats and feels fine for a while before he starts to slip, which makes it easy to miss, and that is the whole danger. The slow thing always is. Number 4 happens before you ever get hungry. It's settled in the parking lot sometimes without the man ever knowing he's making a choice at all. Number 4 is the decision most men make before they ever leave the truck. The mountain men who worked the Rockies in the trapping era worked in pairs for a reason that had nothing to do with enjoying company. 2 men meant someone could pull the other out of a bad crossing. 2 men meant that if one took a fall on a slope, the other went for help or went to work splinting. Somebody noticed when the other didn't come back to camp, and that noticing was the entire search and rescue system available to them. The annual rendezvous, held out in the high country once a year, served partly as a check-in. Traders, trappers, and native peoples gathered to exchange goods and information, and the men who didn't arrive were considered dead. That was the whole protocol. No search party, no second chances. The man who went alone and got badly hurt simply vanished, And the record of that year's missing grew a little longer. A man who breaks his leg 40 miles out, alone, has two options. He drags himself to help, or he dies where he fell. Most of the ones who didn't make it couldn't think clearly enough to choose correctly. Not because they were cowards, but because a bad injury in cold country puts a man's mind in a different place than a broken leg in a parking lot does. Pain, cold, and shock together make a poor committee for deciding what to do next. What you're doing now, if you're honest, is probably this. Hiking solo, which I don't fault you for, with your phone in your pocket as your only plan. No written itinerary left with anyone. No check-in time that commits someone else to act. Maybe you told your wife you'd be back Sunday. Back Sunday is not a rescue trigger. It's a statement. Nobody calls search and rescue because a man who said Sunday walked in Monday morning. The fix is simple. Leave an exact route. Not the park name, the actual route. The trailhead, the direction, the distance out. Give somebody a hard deadline. If I haven't called by Monday at noon, don't call me. Call search and rescue. That person has to be someone who will actually make the call. Not someone who'll give you one more day because they don't want to make a fuss. The fuss is the point. It's what brings the helicopter. I know how this channel's audience thinks, and I'll say it plainly. Going alone is not the mistake. I've gone alone plenty, and I don't regret it. The mistake is making yourself unfindable when it goes wrong. The fix isn't a partner. It's making sure somebody knows how to bring you home if you can't bring yourself. Number 3 is the one that catches good, careful men. The kind who pack right and tell someone where they're going and still don't come home. Keep that in mind. A cut while dressing an elk. A twisted ankle on a loose slope. The blister that soaks through on the second day of a 4-day trip. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would send a sensible man to urgent care. In the records of men who didn't come home. Falls, cuts from knives and axes, and accidental gunshots show up over and over. Not rare bad luck. Routine hazards of the work. Flintlock rifles were loaded by hand in dim light with cold, stiff fingers. An accidental discharge was a regular feature of life in the field. What made those injuries deadly wasn't the wound itself. It was the complete absence of anything that could treat it. A wound that heals fine at home with soap and a clean bandage is a different problem 3 days from any help. Infection doesn't know you're far from a clinic. Blood loss doesn't stop because you have a plan to get out tomorrow. Out there, your survival is a system, and every part holds up the others. A twisted ankle that keeps you from moving also keeps you from staying warm, getting water, and staying fed. A cut hand can't gather firewood or work a fire steel. The injury knocks out one leg of the stool, and the whole thing you were standing on to survive comes down at once. Small injuries become killers, not by getting worse on their own, but by stopping everything else that's keeping you alive. Picture a man who cut his hand badly while skinning an animal, wrapped it with a strip of cloth, and kept working because there was still trap line to run. Not careless, necessary. But that wound had no one to clean it, and nothing to clean it with, and the country doesn't give extensions. The trappers dealt with this constantly. A man who cut himself badly while skinning game might be able to wrap it tight enough to keep working. But if the wound got dirty and went septic, there was nothing to be done. He'd weaken over days and either make it back to camp or he didn't. No antibiotics, no clinic, no second opinion. What you're doing now might look like this. A small first aid kit you put together a few years ago with bandages you've never restocked. No signal device, or a plan that amounts to, I have cell reception at the trailhead. No real thought given to the scenario where you sprain your ankle badly on day 2 of a loop with 2 days left to go. Carry real first aid, not a little plastic kit with 5 bandages and a safety pin. Treat every wound the moment it happens, before it gets a chance to get dirty. And carry something that can actually bring help to you, if walking out isn't an option. A satellite communicator is the modern version of going with a partner. It means somebody can find you when you can't find yourself. Infection doesn't care that it was just a scratch. Neither does blood loss. I won't tell you to panic over every scrape, but I will tell you to carry the thing that handles it every time, with no exceptions. Before number 2, I want to mention this once and then leave it alone. Everything on this channel, the old skills, the frontier history, the things the old hands knew and we've mostly forgotten, it's gathered in a book on my website. I won't bring it up again in this video. If you want it, it's there. If you don't, no matter. Number 2. The old hands respected this one more than anything else in this list. More than storms, more than bears, more than any of the things that get all the fear. The accounts of men dying in that country show drowning as the most common accidental cause of death among the Rocky Mountain trappers. Ahead of freezing, ahead of cave-ins, ahead of animal attacks. Moving water. I know how that lands, because it doesn't match what most people fear when they picture mountain country. But bear attacks were rare. River crossings happened every day. Here is the math that kills people. Knee-deep water in a mountain river runs cold, near freezing in snowmelt season, and it moves at 4 or 5 miles an hour. That doesn't sound like much, but water is heavy in a way air is not, and the force it puts against your legs climbs hard as the current speeds up. Double the speed of the water, and you've roughly quadrupled the push against you. At that speed and depth, the force against a man's legs is enough to take him off his feet. Not knock him stumbling, actually lift him and carry him. And from that moment, everything moves fast and goes wrong in the cold. A man swept off his feet in fast cold water has minutes, not hours. That's all. Most of the drownings in the accounts happened during routine crossings, not floods and not storms. The water looked fordable. It was knee-deep. They went across it wrong and paid for it. Often they went across it with a full pack buckled on their backs, which is the part that turns a fall into a drowning. A pack buckled when you go over and fast water holds you under. You fight the current and your own gear. The men who lived through bad crossings knew to unbuckle before they ever stepped in. Every time, no matter how sure they were they wouldn't fall. The ones who didn't learn that lesson firsthand often didn't get a second one. The crossing rules the old hands passed down aren't complicated. Unbuckle the pack before any moving water crossing. Face upstream and angle downstream as you go, not straight across. Use a walking staff or a long branch for a third point of contact. Find the widest and shallowest section of the river, which is usually where it braids out and slows. If you're not sure it's fordable, it probably isn't. That last one is the one most people skip. Camp placement matters here too. A stream that sits low and harmless at camp time can rise 2 feet overnight from rain falling 10 miles upstream. Camp above the flood line. This isn't a preference. It's the thing that keeps you from waking up to water in your gear, or not waking up at all. What you're doing now, fording a swollen creek because it's only knee-deep. Camping on a sandy flat in a stream bed because it's flat and soft and looks fine. Crossing with your pack, buckled because you've never fallen crossing a stream before. The mountain men made every one of those decisions. The difference is, they crossed rivers daily and got more chances to learn. You're doing it on one trip that has to go right. I've seen what moving water does when a man doesn't respect it. Respect the math before it introduces itself to you. And then there's number 1. I've been holding it back because I want you to hear it right. It doesn't announce itself the way falling in a river does. It doesn't look like an emergency until you're already past the point where you can help yourself the way you need to. Keep that in mind. There's a man wading a cold creek in late October to set his beaver traps before first light. The water is over his knees. His pants are soaked to the thigh. He's working hard and he's warm. Working hard enough that there's sweat starting under his wool shirt. And the wind has come up a little off the ridge. He doesn't stop working. There's more line to set before noon. That is the opening scene of more deaths than any other story I've come across in the accounts of the men who didn't make it home. Not the bear, not the storm, not the river crossing gone wrong. The slow, quiet, certain wet. The kind that comes from doing your job in cold water or sweating through your layers while you push hard across hard country. the kind that settles in without announcing itself, and by the time you feel it, you've already been losing ground for hours. The fur trapper's job was built around freezing water. Prime beaver pelts came from the fall and early spring, when water was coldest and fur was thickest. Setting and checking a trap line meant waiting, not sometimes routinely, every morning, every afternoon, in temperatures that turned standing water to slush at night. Exposure, meaning wet clothing combined with cold and wind, was the leading cause of death across the whole fur trade era. More than any other single thing. More than starvation. More than drowning. More than anything else I've talked about today. When you picture hypothermia, you probably picture a man falling through ice. That happens. But that's not most of it. What killed most of the mountain men, and what still kills most hikers who die of cold, is the slow version. The sweat they didn't notice. The shirt they didn't change when they stopped for the night. The moment they sit down, tired, not cold, just tired, and don't recognize what's already happening inside their chest. Cotton is the specific problem for modern hikers, the way wet buckskin was the problem for some of the old trappers. Cotton absorbs water fast and loses almost all of its insulating value when it's wet. It holds the moisture against your skin. A man in a cotton shirt who sweats through it on a 40-degree day with wind is on a clock, and it isn't a long one. The body is trying to warm the wet fabric instead of keeping itself warm, and it's losing that argument every minute. Wool does the opposite. It holds most of its insulating value even soaked through, and it pulls moisture away from the skin instead of trapping it there. The old hands wore wool for exactly this reason. Not because it was comfortable, it wasn't, but because it gave them time when cotton gave them nothing. A wool-clad man who gets soaked has a window to fix his situation. A cotton-clad man in the same water doesn't. That's the whole difference. One cloth buys you time. The other takes it. Hypothermia moves in stages that are easy to miss from the inside. First, the body shivers hard to generate heat. Then the shivering gets severe, which is the defense still working. Then judgment goes. A man starts making small wrong decisions, sitting down when he should keep moving, fumbling tasks his hands have done 1,000 times, taking off a layer because he feels too warm, not making a fire because he's too tired to gather wood. The old hands read it in a man by the stumbles and the fumbles and the slow, thick speech, because by then, the man himself can't tell you anything is wrong. These decisions feel reasonable. They're not. Then the shivering stops, and that feels like improvement. It isn't. It means the body has spent its last reserve. After the shivering stops, a man has hours at most. The men who froze weren't cold when it started. They were warm. They were working hard with their heads down and their backs into it, and they felt fine right up until the moment they didn't. That is the specific, deadly trap of this one. It feels fine. It keeps feeling fine longer than you'd think, and then it doesn't. What you're doing now, a cotton base layer under a synthetic shell, which is just a warm, wet sponge trapped against your skin all day. Hiking hard and sweating through your underlayer without stopping to change it when you rest. Not carrying a dry backup layer because you're only going out for the day. Treating wet and cold as discomfort instead of the emergency it is. The fix is behavioral, and it doesn't cost much. Wool or synthetics against the skin, every time. No cotton base layers in cold country. Not at any price point. Carry a dry backup layer in a waterproof bag on every trip, as standard as carrying water. When you get wet, change before you cool down, not after. Before. That timing matters more than most people know, because once your judgment starts slipping, your ability to help yourself slips with it. If you are wet and cold and a long way from warmth, treat it as an emergency before you feel like one is happening, not when you feel bad enough to know you should. The old hands called it reading the signs before the signs get loud, and it is the whole difference between the men who walked out and the men who got written down at the rendezvous as not coming back. The mountain doesn't care how much you paid for your pack. What it cares about is whether you know what you're doing before the moment you need to know it. Tell me down in the comments, which one of these surprised you most? Because the one that surprises people says something about what we've stopped teaching. And every answer down there teaches the rest of us something worth knowing. Next time, I want to talk about the one piece of knowledge that kept more mountain men alive through hard winters than any single skill. And I mean that plain. Not gear, not a technique. A piece of knowledge most people today have never encountered. I'll have it here for you. Until then, learn the old way. Stay on the right side of it.